All right, folks, let's just admit it here. What's going on in the Middle East, it's a complete disaster, an absolute disaster. Nobody wants to do anything to stop it. And this really is a response to Ben Shapiro's video he put out just a short time ago, talking about how you're being lied to about Israel. You know, I've made several attempts at this video. I posted a couple of these videos here. Had to take them down because I just wasn't happy with them. But we really have a bad situation in the Middle East that's going to lead to World War III if somebody doesn't step up to the plate and tell these two sides to stop fighting with each other. Now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I don't blame Israel here. Israel got attacked. As a country, they have a right to defend themselves. And I support Israel. And Israel, like any country, isn't perfect. They've made mistakes. But for this UN secretary guy, or whoever it was yesterday, you know, to say that nothing happened in a vacuum, well, guess what? You're not the innocent white, Snow White party you want to make yourself out to be. If I can get the words out today. But I want to react to Ben's video, specifically to the first part of this video where he talks about the early history. And he made it sound like, and somebody else pointed this out here on YouTube, he made it sound like all the history in the Middle East began with the year 1400 BCE. That this was Israeli territory, or this land belonged to the Jews, this land of Israel. Well, the truth is it was known at the time as the land of Canaan. And this was an area that was occupied. It was actually under Egyptian rule. Now, if anybody's going to claim, or have a claim rather, to the land here, it should be Egypt. Just from a historical perspective, because Egypt ruled that area from 1500 BCE to 1200 BCE. Remember, when you're talking about before the first century, you know, you go back in time. So instead of saying, let's say from 1900 to the year 2000, you would say 1500 to the year 1200, or the year 1200 to 900, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you measure that time period. But you had the Amorites, you had the Hittites, the Jebusites. Now, even though they were Semitic, they didn't see themselves as quote-unquote Jewish. And remember, and this is even in the Bible, even in the Old Testament. Listen up, Ben, it's in the Old Testament. That there was this rivalry, that they hated each other. They hated the Israelites. Remember, God was going to bring them out of Egypt. We're going to have this Exodus. Well, the Exodus happened in two waves. 1446 CBE, and in, well, going back to 1225 CBE, somewhere around there, and 1446 CBE. So there were two waves of this Exodus out of Egypt. But even when Joshua went into the land of Canaan in 1405 CBE, it was still under Egyptian control. So in reality, Egypt is the one that would really have claim to this land. Not the Palestinians, not the Israelites, not even the Jordanians. Because that area of land included what we now know as Israel. It included the Gaza Strip. Egypt set up posts along the Gaza area. They had temples and homes that were built, and mansions. Also included part of, I think, the northern part of Syria. So this was a large area of land that was under Egyptian control. Now, they lost that in 1200, but that's what happened. And Ben was not talking about that history in his video. And yes, it's true. You had King David, King Solomon. Solomon was the son of David. And they had a singular kingdom that ruled over that area. But that area was split into two kingdoms. And you had Israel in the north, you had Judah in the south. So that's really what happened with the history of this. Then you have the Fertile Crescent that goes back further than that. Now, what people don't want to talk about, and this is a very important topic to discuss, is that you had this theological split after the first century, after the death and resurrection of Christ, you had this split in theology within the Jewish community. Because in the first century under Roman rule, the Jewish people, the Israelites, were looking for a political savior. And Jesus' message was all about, his message was all about a spiritual salvation, spiritual liberation. So all throughout the Byzantine Empire, that's when you have the rise of the Catholic Church, where it really flourishes. But even then, there was a split within the Catholic Church, between the Greek Orthodox and the Byzantine Empire, which saw itself more as Western Roman. They had a dispute over whether or not they should use leavened or unleavened bread in their communion services, the sacraments. And the Messianic Jews, people say that started really in the 1960s, 1970s. Well, no, the Messianic Jews actually came out of this Judeo-Christian ideal. The Judeo-Christian ideal. Now, I was raised in a, if you want to call it that, an evangelical, non-denominational. I'm trying to do this in a short amount of time here, this video. So, I grew up in a non-denominational church. We studied the Passover. We studied the Bible, Old and New Testament. We celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. You have to study the Greek, the Hebrew, the Latin, because of certain words in the Bible. You need to know their root, where they came from, what they mean. So I'm really surprised that Ben didn't talk about this, and he should have talked about this in his video. The early history of what happened in that area, the Fertile Crescent, what happened before 1400 BCE or CBE, whatever you want to say it. But that's a very important part of history that you can't gloss over. Because that really is the root of a lot of the conflict we see now, going back to that time period. So this is an area that's always had land disputes. This is an area that's always had, these different conflicts. This isn't anything new. So I thought I'd come here and talk about this. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can also follow me on Instagram, #JasonComposes, because I write music in my spare time. Or you can find me at X, Culture Confederacy at CultureConfed1 on X. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. God bless this thing called the United States. Thank you for letting me stumble through this today. I'll catch you next time, and y'all have a great Wednesday.